Hey, Sophia, I'm heading your way. How's the weather in New England?
Very rainy at the moment.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I want sunshine in 70s. Can you arrange for that?
It's going to be that for later this week. So
awesome.
Depends on when you come.
I'm flying out Wednesday. Hey, Joe Brown.
Hi.
How nice to see you, and how fun it is to have both you and Yvette.
Yes, it is. Let me try to get my earphone in.
Sure. Are you working? I thought you took the summer off.
I am working, but I'm off in the summer, but I do have hours that I work, and I had to come to work anyway.
Yeah.
Are you going to mute yourself?
Catch up on some summer school stuff. Wait, this isn't working.
Are you going to mute yourself during or?
Yeah, let's mute each other and then.
Okay.
So at 10 minutes.
Test.
Oh, it's because I started the microphone after this. Okay. Beth, will that bother you if I?
Are you good, JT?
Okay. All righty.
Are you good?
Yeah, I need to join the Zoom.
Okay.
We still have a couple minutes.
Okay, great.
And they'll start popping in really quickly.
It was a toss up between coming to work and doing it and having, people do work here, or having my dogs bark and having my husband come in and out constantly of the house. So I picked coming to work. You bet you can relate to that. How are y'all?
Good. How are you?
Good. It's so good to see y'all this morning.
I'm recording.
I could just imagine Charlie walking around in his short shorts in the background.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah.
Throwback to the 80s.
Her husband's name is Charlie Brown, y'all.
Yeah.
How cute is that? Like the cartoon.
Joe and I actually have this weird connection. Actually, her husband and I have and I've never met. Well, yes, once I met Charlie, I think when you were in Colorado camping, but we have this weird connection with a person in my family and in his family, something. There's some sort of relationship.
Really?
It's really weird that that I found out in a very bizarre way.
That is cool. You need to share that with me.
I did. This was a couple of years ago, but it was so out of context. It was very crazy. Yeah. Okay. So, hi, Tim. Sarah, are you there?
It's not very loud, is it? No, I turned it up all the way. I still just can't hear you. I have
Kirsten.
It won't hook up after I've already gotten on. Yeah.
Sarah, Inger, Molly, Jordan, Sophia, Lindsay, Tim. Ryan won't be with us. Aaron won't be with us. Yvette, Sarah, Charnette. I think we're just waiting for Charnette. Hi, Sarah.
Sarah, are you driving?
I am 2 blocks away from my house, but I didn't want to log in late, so I'll be on my laptop in a minute.
I appreciate that. Okay, well, let's get started. We have Lindsay and Jordan who are interpreting the session today, and they're on a different platform. I don't think there's anyone that needs the interpretation. Is that true? We're all good? Okay. It's here's Charnette. So I want to welcome Joe Brown as our guest speaker and our final guest speaker. We've had 5 guest speakers, Joe. And Joe has graduated as a BA student, as I told you, in 2010. Is that what we had talked
11.
about? And you were with Tiffany Harding, correct?
What's that?
You were with Tiffany Harding?
Correct. Yeah.
And Tiffany was a guest speaker, and then she's also was their mentor last week. So
I love Tiffany. I'm sure y'all do too.
Yeah, she's wonderful. And Joe and I have become colleagues, and she steps up every time I have asked her to do something. She has stepped up. I recruited her to be the membership director when NAIE started. and she stepped up to a very daunting task. And you did that for 2 years, right,
Mhm.
Joe?
Yeah, loved it.
So I liked having Joe come and be a guest speaker because she has a very interesting story with regard to how she started as an interpreter, and then went into the UNC program, and then, what transpired after that. So I'm going to have you share, Joe, a little bit about how that happened, like your position now and how your BA program sort of worked for you
Okay.
to benefit you and your job.
Okay. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay. I usually use a headset, but for some reason I didn't do it right today and it won't hook up now.
Make sure you stay straight ahead, because sometimes if you turn or whatever, then the mics come more one directional.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Beth is one of my coworkers here. So she's giving me some tips. She's also working some a summer position here.
Hold
my
on.
name is Joe
I'm
Brown.
sorry. I have to record. Hold on.
Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. For those watching the recording, sorry, I forgot about the recording button, so you missed the introduction. But go ahead.
Is there any way you could turn up the volume on your end?
Yeah, you can't hear me?
I can hear you, but not very loud, and I have my volume up all the way.
I have a laptop that has the same issue, Joe. And if you have external speakers or earbuds that you can plug in, that usually...
I do, but for some reason, when I connect to the meeting and then try to hook up my microphone and earphone, it won't hook up.
Yeah, I'm not sure mine will
And I don't
either.
have any of the old-fashioned kind that just hook in.
I have some, but I can.
Oh.
I don't know what.
I'll talk louder. Is that better?
Yeah, Beth has some that she's going to give me right now.
Technical issues.
Sorry.
Yeah, see, this won't work.
If it doesn't work, you can always click on the little pyramid next to the mute button after you've tried hooking up, and then you can manually select where your audio and your microphone come from. But give it a shot. Plug it in first. We'll see.
No, it just says toggle mute.
There should be little pyramid
speak.
next to it.
Okay, just speak louder, and then I'll get some old-timey earphones that I can plug in.
Yeah, I'll speak. Is that better?
That's fine. Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. Okay, so my name is Joe Brown, and I graduated from UNC in 2011. And I've been working for the school system for a long time, for about 25 years, not always in the deaf ed program. I started off as a Title I tutor, and then I worked in special ed for a while. And then I took a few classes at Delgado Community College, and I thought I was an interpreter. And I started working in the deaf ed program. Well, as y'all know, that I probably shouldn't have been working in the deaf ed program at that time because I didn't know I wasn't ready. So then I graduated from Delgado, and I kept working in the deaf ed program. And after about 8 years, I realized that, okay, thank you. Oh, these are
That's what I'm telling you.
these are cool. Oh, I don't know.
They do work.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna try these real quick and just see. Well, y'all can hear me, so I won't try them yet. So I was working in the deaf ed program as an interpreter, and I just felt like I was failing. I just felt like I was failing myself, failing the kids, and I wasn't doing justice to, and I wasn't an interpreter. So I was either going to drop out, just not be an interpreter anymore, leave the field, maybe become a teacher. And then all of a sudden I got this opportunity. Leilani Johnson came to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Yeah. And at that time they had a scholarship. And so I just grabbed onto that, and I decided, if I'm going to say I'm an interpreter, I'm going to become an interpreter. So I started at UNC. It took me probably 4 years to graduate. I thought I'd probably graduate in 2 to 3 years, but it took me about 4 years, and it was fabulous. As y'all know, at the point you are now, you've been through all your classes, and you don't know how much you don't know until you start taking those classes, and it brings you back to all the problems that you've had throughout the years, and you're like, well, that's why I had a problem. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know about that. I didn't know about demand control schema. That's the reason why I couldn't work through these interpreting ethical decisions that I was trying to make and that were eating me alive, because I didn't have the tools to do that. So then, of course, after I graduated, and even during my coursework, I started to see what needed to be changed in the system, in the Deaf Ed program, and what our district had and what they didn't have and what they needed, and going through the Deaf Ed program at UNC gave me the tools to see how to navigate that, how to start change, how to develop avenues of teaching people what the Deaf Ed program needed in our system. And so that's kind of like where I am today, is by developing and opening avenues and maybe programs and working with the people who will listen and understand what our system needed. So as right now, my position is assistant coordinator for the Deaf Ed program, and I'm also the interpreter coordinator. Now, before that, we never had that position before. I had to develop that, and I had to let the faculty and administration know that it needed to be a position, but that was hard to do. So what we did in the beginning is, okay, I worked as an interpreter, and then I became the lead interpreter. And from that, I had enough foundation built to talk about, needing a interpreter coordinator. And
let me interrupt you, Joe. Do you mean, when you say foundation built, do you mean the foundation of schema and understanding of the work, or foundation with relationships within the district, or both?
Both, because you have to know the work in order to explain why something is needed, why a position needs to be established and put into place. So it's like a balancing act, it's, and still, every day at work is like, sometimes I'm climbing up and sometimes I'm slipping back. We've made a lot of changes. We've made a lot of improvements. We've developed in a lot of different ways, but we've also gone backwards sometimes. And Yvette worked for us for quite a while. How many years did you work, Yvette?
Maybe 6.
6
or 7, something like that.
She knows. Have any of y'all worked in K through 12 setting? A lot of y'all have. Yeah. So you probably know the challenges that are faced in that setting, and in any setting, really. But and it's, I'm always questioning myself, am I doing better, or am I making things more difficult? It's, I don't know. I'm kind of talking in circles. Sorry.
Well, let me just sort of guide you a little bit, Joe.
Thank
you.
We
have, just to give you a bit of background, I think there are 12 interns, and 2 of them are community. So Sophia and Jordan. Sophia is on the screen and Jordan is interpreting. But the majority of the interns are working in K-12 or are planning on working in K-12, which is why I wanted to talk with you because of that's your focus. And one of the things that you said was you started in the 90s as an interpreter.
Mm-hmm.
And then you transitioned into the BA program it must have been 2008, somewhere in there.
Yeah, about 2007. Yeah, about 2007, 2008.
And then you were part of the launching and first 2 years of NAIE.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, how each of those time periods were significantly different within the field. Can you speak to that?
Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna ask you to repeat that.
Yeah, because I'm sitting back in my chair.
Sorry, that's all. I tried to look for other ones, I couldn't.
Now, let me see if these work. Hold on 1 second. I don't have 2 holes to put it in.
I think the
Okay.
one has a microphone and one has a little.
Can you talk, Susan? Let me see.
Test. Is that better?
Now, one more time.
Is that better?
No,
Can you hear me better?
It's okay. I can hear it okay. It's all right.
sorry, I was just wondering, is it turned off this?
It's all right. I can hear. I'm gonna focus.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good.
No, thanks for trying to help. Is that better if I come closer to the microphone?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so just to reiterate the question, the 1990s, which is when you started after going to Delgado, which was a 2-year ITP in Louisiana.
Right.
And then you started in about approximately 2008, 2009, somewhere in there with the VA program.
Right.
And then you graduated, moved forward, were a part of NAIE's launching. So those are 3 significant time periods within the field. Can you talk about how the differences, just in summary, the differences between the approach to the work in the late 90s and the approach to the work when you started the BA, which demand control was just starting. And then with NAIE and moving forward now.
Right. Complete different mindsets, and well, maybe not complete, but a lot of different mindsets, which kind of was a positive thing and a negative thing in some ways, because just focusing on the interpreter part, what I learned at Delgado and through that program was following the professional RID code of conduct, things like that. And then, and that's one reason why working in the school system, I felt like I was failing, because I could see that mindset that didn't always work in the school system. So then when I went to UNC and took those classes and went through that coursework, I could understand and work better in the classroom. I could handle the problems that I had before, because I knew different ways to work with the students and the interpreters in a more holistic, way, in looking at the goal of the classroom, the goal of the setting. And then transitioning into NAIE, that matched what I was taught at UNC, and it matched what works in the school system. So, and plus it gave me a home and a place where I knew people thought the same as I do, because if you worked in the school system before, you'll know you sit down to discuss something with somebody and they're like, no, we can't do it. It's wrong. That's not the way we do it. And most of the time, well, you can either leave mad or you can talk through it and explain why, and explain, and have the information to explain why and be able to. And UNC and NAIE offers that, and made my life a lot easier and more like I get it. This is what we need. This is what the kids need. And then
So-
to have the support from NAIE to back that up.
I was always the one that left mad. Joe was always calming me down. She's always had the level head and calm and it's okay, Beth. And I'm like, no. Human.
Yeah. Well, that's what kept me going was my like anger of, I do want to just sort of touch really quickly on the late 90s because in the late 90s when interpreters were going into the classroom and I was one of those interpreters, it was that you approached the work as an RID certified interpreter following the code of ethics. And it didn't fit. It didn't fit. If you know anything about working in the community and the ethics, the CPC, what they were requiring, and the CPC was different at that time. They've updated it. It didn't work. And it was very frustrating for those interpreters, even going through ITPs. I didn't go through an ITP, but someone like Joe, who did, where they were teaching you this one paradigm that just wasn't fitting with children. Right. And for practitioners in the classroom to try and articulate that to peers and colleagues that were working in the community, it was a huge conflict. So UNC, at the time it was the DeWitt Center, was the only institution in the country, the only institution that actually was focusing on educational interpreting in a different paradigm, working from the lens of a child. So just wanted to speak to that.
I agree 100%. Yep.
So if you could talk now a little bit about knowing how to talk the talk and the challenges that you had with your administration to get them to begin to understand the work of interpreters.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and it's a challenge that sometimes you just want to quit, and sometimes you're like, nope, I'm not going to quit because we've come this far. There's no way I'm going to quit. So after I talked them into, after I became a lead interpreter, and I was lucky enough to work with my boss who was right above me. She understood and she would listen. That's one of the most important things. She would listen. And she would ask questions. And so it was wonderful to have her. And then our big boss, who she went to, our big boss, I have a lot of grandchildren, so this is why I'm using it. Our supervisor above at the time was Sharon Hosh, and she was fabulous. So she would listen also. So that's when we did open up the position and develop the position of assistant coordinator. And so, it was like a 2-year process. I didn't have a teacher certification, so we had to work through it. So I had to research and see what I did have and how we could compare it. And anyway.
So speaking with regard to the system that you were working within, yes, the educational system and the human resources.
So trying to work through the system and make it work where it would be easier for them to develop the position. Anyway, so what we did have to have through the state of Louisiana was an ancillary certificate, and I had that, and most of the interpreters do get that when they get a certain score on their EIPA and the written. So anyway, we went through that and we compared them, and they were the same thing. So they're like, it's not a big deal, okay? And so then the next year, I had to apply for the job, but then I was put in for that. So anyway, I'm kind of going off topic here. Would you ask me, Susan?
So it's just how you worked with the administration. Okay. But now that you've answered that, I'm going to ask you how. So before you got into this position, who was responsible for the interpreters? Was it another interpreter? Was it TOD?
Really, there was really no one. I guess it was like my direct supervisor, who also was a supervisor for interpreters, for deaf ed teachers, for speech pathologists, for assistive technology, she had so many roles. So there's no way she could have known what the interpreters need, you know, what an interpreter does. Her background was speech therapy, and she was fabulous, but there's no way that she can run all those departments in a district as big as we are. So go ahead.
So now I'm curious to know if you could talk about how the differences that it made once you were in that position with your team, the interpreters, and then maybe Yvette can also share her perspective.
Sure. Before that position, you know, we made it that the people that were hiring interpreters thought that they could hire people as interpreters who maybe took a sign class or 2 sign classes. They didn't evaluate, you know, I don't know how they evaluated them. Probably maybe finger spelling their name and things like that. You know, I don't know. So for one, you know, they hired people that weren't qualified. There was nobody to evaluate the interpreters once they did start working. There was really no one of a hierarchy that they could go to, interpreters could go to when they had questions or, you know, had problems. Now, luckily, we did have some good interpreters and some seasoned interpreters that worked in the school system. So I think they probably went to them, the teachers of the deaf. You know, they kind of worked with hiring the interpreters and working with the interpreters and helping make the interpreter schedules. But that's one thing I saw was that it was chaos. It was a mess. And that kind of helped me, you know, with explaining why we need a lead interpreter and why we need an interpreter coordinator. You know?
So that the chaos actually worked to your benefit.
Right. I mean, we'd have days sometimes when no kids would be covered. And I mean, they didn't mean to do it that way, but if someone was absent, there was like no one that had time to look, and
they'll be fine. The kids will be fine. Yeah. It's just one day, not a big deal.
Right. Not a big deal. And, you know, if there was a student absent, then it might be midday before they realize that and, you know, move the interpreter to the child who doesn't have an interpreter. You know, it was a mess.
So Yvette, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of pre and post and your experience working with Joe, having seen the system or been a part of the system shifting and changing to a more positive approach?
Sure. I wasn't really a part of when there wasn't an interpreter coordinator. So thankfully I didn't have to experience that. I had Joe as my guiding light the whole time. And
did you go to Delgado as well?
I did. Yeah, that's the only ITP program in that area. And that's where Anna Whitta-Merrithew went too, right? I think.
Anna Whitta-Merrithew? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I saw her. I thought she said something about Delgado. Never mind.
Maybe she did a talk there once.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. But so Joe not only learned how to create the position and what the district needed from her classes at UNC, but she also learned how to guide younger, newer interpreters that, you know, graduated and kind of were like, I don't really know what to do next. And that's kind of how she took me in under her wing and was like, okay, well, we're going to work with you and we'll get you to the point where you can be in the classroom. And then she started guiding me and was like, maybe you should think about getting a bachelor's. And then that's how I got into UNC eventually. And then she got me into NAIE. And so it also brought together like different channels that I could use in order to develop my networking and connections and how to work with people in different situations. But Jo, thankfully, like I said, she's just an amazing person. She's a people person. and she knows how to work with everyone. And I think a lot of that is her herself, but I think a lot of it came from her experience at UNC as well, and how to work with people and talk to people and basically get what you need, what you want, what the kids need through her communicating skills that she learned.
Thank you. And I want to get to the kids, but first I do want to share a little bit about Jo and her approach, because I have known her for a very long time. It's really amazing how long we've known each other. And I have to say that she would not tout this, but what she has done in her district is really a huge feat. And not only did she take what she learned in the BA program, and you also took the Leadership and Supervision Certificate program, right. Your professional development you continued on that path, right, with your professional development. But the strategies and approaches that she takes with the interpreters are really model approaches. And I don't know, I'm actually working with her with this team interpreting book that I'm working on, and interviewed Jo, because some of these small districts, like Jo's, how many interpreters do you work with, Jo?
About 17.
And working with that, those numbers, right? And it's a regional school, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So what that
district is,
what that looks like. And she just really some models. So if in the future you're working in a situation or a school district and you run across issues or problems, or you're looking for strategies, I'm going to volunteer Jo.
Yeah.
And
bring them my way. If I haven't experienced it before, I want to know about it. So
Right. And there's ongoing conversation, right, Jo? I mean, you've kept up with your BA colleagues, your peers, your peeps from that time, and collaborated. So now take us and talk a little bit about the progress that you've made within the school district, the progress you've made with your interpreting team. And my understanding is you've also really worked hard to develop their skills, which Louisiana statistically has low EIPA scores. But Jo has worked really hard to develop those skills within her district. With that, how have all of these changes and implementations of strategies and approaches affected the children, the students themselves?
Well, I mean, it's heartwarming to see a lot of the students succeed, and then it's devastating seeing some of them not succeed. And we've seen both. So the strategies that I'm like, of course, we have employed interpreters who probably are not ready to be on their own in the classroom as interpreters. And I hate to even admit that, but there's just such a shortage. And, that's just a fact. I would love to just hire people who scored a 4.0 or higher on their EIPA. Louisiana only requires them to have a 3.0 right now. We've been trying to change that for a while because we know that that's too low. But
so let's just stop there for a minute.
Okay.
You all understand. Sarah's like, ooh. You all understand, right? A 3.0 is horrible. With all due respect to Jo and the work she's done, and it's not the only state, right. But that just should not be, because what happens is the interpreters don't take the responsibility to go past what is required and do the work for themselves to benefit the children.
Right.
So just had to add that. I can't let that go.
But I will have to say that since NAIE has been established, and we've shared the guidelines, most all of our interpreters are members there now, that they do understand and they do want to score higher, even if, they just made like a 3.3 or whatever.
So I just to emphasize that the NAIE and their involvement with a profession that's specifically related to K-12 interpreting has made a difference with their perception of the work.
Right. Definitely. It definitely has. And I forgot what I was talking about again.
Well, because I keep interrupting you.
No, it's okay. No.
I keep interrupting Jo because I do. I know her well, and just to keep her on track.
I need someone to keep me on track. I'm very ADHD, and it's like, okay, I usually have notes written because I will go way off in the left field or right field or whatever.
But I said this was going to be sort of a just.
Oh, but we were talking about like
the children.
The children, okay. I mean, we have as much professional development as we can during the year. A lot of our interpreters are going back to school. Yvette was one of ours, and she went back to school. Some of them have graduated from other universities that offer a BA program in interpreting. Not that I've really encouraged them to go there, but it's, I'm encouraging them to get their BA. So, I do see so much growth, and as long as I'm seeing growth, I feel like, I feel better for the kids. And we do, in our interpreters, we do discuss a lot. We're all connected. No one works in a silo. We're all, we all share, we'll meet, maybe if it's even just at lunchtime, and discuss, what works best with the student. What tools have you been using? Because sometimes it's not all about your science skills, it's about your ethical decision-making skills. And, some of our students are so diverse. They might have a cochlear implant, they might have 2 cochlear implants, they might speak for themselves, they might just use an interpreter for receptive skills. So, we just look at each child as an individual, and we kind of try to fit the interpreters with them and make sure we don't have just one interpreter. Because if you just have one interpreter with them and a mistake is being made, it's going to continue to be made. And if you don't see growth in that student, then there's a problem, So we try to keep the pulse of, what's going on with the kids, and also to have clear communication with the teacher of the deaf or whoever their teacher is, and the mainstream teachers. Yeah.
So I'm gonna open it up to questions, Jo. I just want to follow up on that. I'm curious to know, since you have worked your way into this position, developed this position, diligently worked to improve, and you're right, seeing progress, you have to acknowledge the progress, even though you're not where you need to be. Right. You know that you're moving forward to a goal. Since the development of the team and your approaches to the work, have you found that your colleagues, teaching colleagues, administration, that kind of those peripheral people within the work, see your work and the interpreter's work in a more professional way?
Yes and no. Some do, some don't. Of course, we try to gravitate to the ones who do understand it. And I mean, even if it means like changing the kids out of a classroom, we may have to do that. Usually we try to work with it first, try to educate them and talk to them about it. But I mean, sometimes no matter what you try to do, it still isn't a successful placement. So yeah, we do end up switching students out. What really aggravates me is how long that takes sometimes, because they might need data on, why is it not working? And and that you just have to work with the system and try to do things as quick as possible. But sometimes it does take a while.
Which is hard for the students.
Yeah, it's very hard for the students. We had a little guy in pre-K this year, and his placement was awful. It was wrong. The teacher was a sweet woman, but she was her first year teaching. They had a couple of paras in the class to just butt heads with the interpreter. And it was just awful. So, you know, I went to my boss and I talked to her about it. And then she's a data person. So she's like wanting to know why. And so we had to go do some observations in the room for a while, and then scoped out a teacher that would work better for him. And once we made the move, it was like night and day. He just soared. He's adorable, and he's just doing so well.
That's wonderful. And you said something very important, that the person that you were speaking with and working through this, working for a resolution with,
right,
was a data person.
Right.
That's really important to know who you're working with and what their needs are, right? What's going to help to convince them. There are people that want data. There are more other people who are by the book. You know, this is a system and this is what we have to work with. And then there are some people who are more touchy-feely. So that was a very interesting point that you made.
Right.
All right, we have just a couple more minutes. I would like to open it up to questions.
Sure.
Inger.
I actually am very curious about what you just talked about as far as bad placement with a student. I actually just got done working a school year, which I felt was a very bad placement for a student. The teacher absolutely thought I was in the way. I was just an extra person that was not needed. And so I went to the TOD first that was assigned to this student and kind of described the situation and asked her to come in and observe and see what she thought. And she really wasn't that interested. And so I felt very like, now what do I do? Because she's the only one that has a relationship with that student. And I felt very stuck. And, you know, kind of the last thing she said to me was, oh, well, I'm sure it'll work out. It'll be okay. And I'm thinking, except this student has this teacher again next year, because they have a teacher for 2 years. And I said, well, what happens next year? Because I feel like the student is missing out on so much by always having this kind of like conflict. And, you know, a lot of times she would kind of ignore him and, you know, really wouldn't, not that she was never mean or anything like that, you know, nothing in that regard, but I just felt like he wasn't given the same opportunities. And so I guess I'm curious, and by the way, that was my first year in that district. So I really was like, I'm not exactly sure who to talk to. And they don't really have an interpreter coordinator that knows what we do. So I don't know like how much I want to rock the boat and how far I want to push with them. What would be your suggestion? What do you think my next step should be? Because I don't even think I'm working with that student next year, but I just feel like
it's going to be in the back of your mind. Right. If you don't do something about it, I know I'll lay in bed and it'll eat me alive until I try to do something about it. And it's so hard to know where to start. I always try to keep in the forefront, you know, okay, this is about the student. So I may have to make some decisions and do things that are going to be hard and that I'd rather not do. Maybe I have to make some more liberal decisions that I may, and I don't even want to tell y'all this, you know, I may like get kind of fussed at or in trouble for, but that's something you have to like kind of work through. So if, for one thing, I would take data, I would write down what's going on, what's happening, what you see. Is the student successful? Is the student shutting down? Is, you know, and why? Things like that. And it depends on the age of the student too. Like, is a student at an age where they can advocate for themselves? Because if they're in high school and something and they can advocate for themselves, they're not, okay. One time we did have a student it was from the junior high to high school years where she could not stand working with her teacher of the deaf. She shut down. She didn't like him. She didn't want to work with him. It made her a nervous wreck. She was physically and emotionally just drained because of it. And so we worked through it, and she just didn't have a teacher of the deaf anymore because she flourished working with just the interpreter in the mainstream classroom. But I mean, that was a little of her advocating and us kind of, walking her through what she needed to do in order to get that released on her IEP. But yeah, you just take data, work with things like that, find out like who, if the teacher that you're working with isn't, you said you talked to her, where's the next step? Who should I go to next? Maybe is it the assistant principal? Is it the resource teacher?
Or maybe
Is
it's
it
just the classroom
counselor?
teacher.
Right. That was just a classroom teacher. Yeah. So figure out and when you first start in a place, you don't really know personalities yet. And so you're not real sure about who's going to listen, but just kind of keep all your blinders off and just kind of, listen and you'll start to learn, who's more open, who knows more about special ed, who may know more about deaf ed. And then if you go to one person and you don't get any results, then go to somebody else. And if you keep the conversation about the student, then nobody can really get aggravated with you if it's for the student's good.
And that's a very, very important point that I also mention and emphasize in my classes. It's always about the student. If you keep the focus on the student,
right,
our administration is going to react differently. They're more careful. They're more cautious.
Right.
And Inger, I'd be happy to talk with you further about that situation and sort of expand upon some of the recommendations spot on that Joe suggested.
And
Kirsten.
reach out to me too if you need any help. I'll be glad to help you.
Yep.
I have another more specific question like Inger had that was just for recommendations. I'm living in that world of chaos that you described earlier with multiple interpreters, no management, no supervision. But the problem, the chink in the armor for following your footsteps, because I'm sitting here writing as many notes as I can, is that admin has one contact point with one specific interpreter. So admin thinks that this is not chaotic because they only have to deal with one person. So from their perspective, they see us working well because they don't see the chinks, like they just see their one contact person who's handling it, but it is still chaotic. So where do I go first to show this chaos that's not being seen by the higher levels?
Who is admin?
Vice principal and program specialist. So we have my direct supervisor is our program specialist, the vice principal, and then the principal is our chain of command.
And that's at that one school.
Mm-hmm.
And what state are you in?
California.
San Diego?
Bakersfield. Where's
so that's, yeah.
Like 4 hours above that.
Yeah, okay. So Sacramento area.
No, lower than that. Like right in between San Diego and Sacramento.
Okay.
We're in the middle of nowhere. Pick a piece
so it's a rural district.
And we all think, is it? Well, we all think that, if it's in California, it must be fabulous,
Oh my God, California's a mess.
Is it a mess? I've heard lately that it is, yes. Well, so they're not seeing what's going on. So they don't have a touch on their departments and what's happening. Well, then I would the same thing. Are the students succeeding? Are the students all making A's? They are?
No,
they're not. Okay. So then I would use that as your start right there. So, and don't ever wait for someone else to take care of it. So if you're working with a group of 4 or 5 interpreters and you see chaos and you see chaos for weeks and weeks, it's like, okay, who's going to take care of it? Well, nobody is. So if you see it and it bothers you, then that's probably your job to have to start taking care of it. If there's nobody that can go to. And, that's just a big responsibility to take. But I would set up a meeting with, if your assistant principal is in charge of interpreters, who does your evaluations? at the end of the year?
I haven't had an evaluation.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, a bit.
if you're like late for work or if you're going to be absent, who do you have to report to?
I report to the school secretary, who I think is under the principal. But the vice principal is the one that's in charge of us.
Okay. So then I would go to that vice principal first and let them know that, you know, I've felt that this problem has reached the, you know, degree that the importance that I need to have a talk with you. So maybe ask if you can set up a meeting time with them and let them know that the students are not getting and not getting what they need because, and then have some facts, some data written down. And
you also, you have to be willing to take the risk, like Joe said.
Right.
That's really.
And I wouldn't leave there either, leave the meeting by just letting her know what's going on. You know, ask her, you know, what is the next step? What can be done about this? When will we meet again? Who should we bring into this mix? Is there a mental health provider that works for the school?
Yes.
You know, or the school counselor? Things like that, maybe. You know?
Good advice. All right, last question, Tim.
Oh, I was going to expand on what Kirsten brought up. I think it's a really interesting situation that people find themselves in all too often, where the chain of command is disjointed from, you know, the classroom. There isn't someone who has a pulse on the interpreters. So I recognize the importance of having data in most situations. That is not only having the data, but having the data focused on the students' success and grades. And the grades are important also. You know, you can have observations, I assume, Joe, on how they feel, you know, when they show up at
their
class.
Emotional and social development too.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you can use the park to guide that, it gives you a little bit more, it gives you a lot more of an objective, you know, based on this document that we as interpreters are supposed to use. And that ties you into NAIE. And I'm curious between Susan and Joe, if you have a recommendation of some real, just a couple bullet points so you don't overwhelm, you know, in your first meeting with the vice principal, a couple bullet points of this is the problem that we see in student performance. And this is what isn't happening according to the guidelines for educational interpreters. There's probably a direct tie here. What are just like a couple bullet points from NAIE on recommendations for, you know, consistency, for example, of interpreters, and then of course, you know, qualification too, that you can hand someone in that admin position and be like, these are issues that could change, that would bring us up to the standard of expectation for interpreters, which will probably impact the student's success.
Mm-hmm. Well, I often use the NAIE guidelines, you know, as a guiding,
principles,
like a form or like a outline, and use that and go to the administrators or something with that, and then also have the data from what's happening in the classroom, what's happening at that school. And then I would also add on, you know, information about how it can change, you know, and maybe other districts where it is different, where they do have a different setup and how it is working, how it is successful. It's always good to bring that information, not just saying, okay, we're failing, we're not doing this, we're not doing that, but look at
having solutions.
That is, that, you know.
Yvette, we have to wrap up.
I just want to make one last comment. Before I left, Joe actually got a mental health provider to come in, that new sign language, and is also hard of hearing, to communicate with the deaf children about their feelings and their emotions and their behavioral outbreaks and stuff like that. So that is something else. I mean, Kirsten, I know you're like the youngest interpreter where you work, and you're probably like, why would they listen to me? This is going to be hard. You got to be willing to take those risks, because when you do, if you keep pushing, you get certain things. And I mean, the kids, ever since what Joe has set up, I mean, it's such a better situation. It really is.
That has made a big difference. And at first, I mean, I knew Paula Rodriguez is our mental health provider for all of our deaf and hard of hearing students, and also some CODA kids and, things like that. But I tried to get her on years before, or like a year before, just going through my administrators and such. And they would listen to me, but they were like, yeah, maybe, but then I didn't get what I wanted from them. So I went to our mental health provider coordinator, and I discussed it with her. And she had actually had a deaf friend in college. And I think she worked either in California or New York. And she worked a little bit with the deaf community. So she understood in a second. And she's like, definitely, we've got to have, because I was explaining to her, we have mental health providers that work with our deaf students, but yet we have to put an interpreter in there. And it may be an interpreter that works with that student, because we can't always get one from the agency. And I'm like, how wrong is that? So I said they have to have direct communication with a mental health provider. So that has been a fabulous bit for our students. And
Paul, I have to say, Paula Rodriguez is a spitfire. Yeah, she doesn't mince words.
And then she has brought in people who work for her, because our district now sees how wonderful she works with the kids. And so she brings in deaf role models that give presentations like 2 or 3 times a year to our students. And this year, with our group of 6th graders that are moving to the junior high, we started like 2 months ago, and every other week we had a presentation with different younger deaf people, older deaf people, deaf blind people come in, and we've and they've flourished with that. It's been fabulous for them.
Well, you have done amazing work, Joe. I tout your work.
I have a lot more to do, but
well, we all do, but you really have made a significant difference, not just in your district, but I think within the state of Louisiana. And I admire the work that you have done. Yeah. So, and I also really respect and thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your work with our students, because I do think you have a great impact on the field. So thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry the sound was a bit funky.
No, look, I wouldn't have come here. She's gone now. Love her, Beth. But when I came here last week and week before last, it was so quiet. There was no one working here. And today, the minute I open up my computer, here she comes. And I was like, oh my goodness.
It was fine. It was fine. Oh, thank you so much. Right. And we'll talk soon, and enjoy your grandbabies. Okay. Are you feeling okay?
Yeah, I'm feeling fine. But yeah, I had my grandbabies this weekend, and 2 of them got sick. One threw up all over. I sleep with the baby, and he just woke up throwing up all over. But anyway, so far so good. Hoping all right. Get their diseases. But
all right. Anyway, well, Joe, thank you so much.
Good work. Don't give up. We need y'all. The kids need y'all. And what you've learned at UNC is going to serve you well for the rest of your life in many, many ways. Contact me for anything. Bye, Yvette.
I love you. I miss you so much.
Can I say one quick thing really quick?
Yeah.
We did just pass one thing, one problematic rule, I guess, with our interpreters. We've changed them from being under the para umbrella, but it's only, it's a little bit at a time, but now they don't have to take off a half a day or a whole day. They can take off increments of 15 minutes. They could, because of our shortage and stuff, so we got that changed. They can take off time like a coordinator takes off. So like paras and teachers have to take off a half a day or a whole day, But our interpreters now can take off 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. They don't have to take that off. They also don't need to punch the time clock anymore. So they sign into the red book like speech therapists do, like APE teachers, O&M teachers, things like that.
Right, related services.
It sounds like a little thing, but it's one step at a time.
Sure.
You're trying to get me to move back home, huh, Joe?
Yep.
All right, Joe, thank you very much. We'll talk soon.
Okay, y'all take care. Good luck.
Thank you. I do want to just mention two final things to wrap up Joe's conversation. One is with regard to the hierarchy, you have to have allies and you have to find out who those allies are. It could be the PE teacher that is your ally, but there is a hierarchy that you have to work within. And sometimes the hierarchy you need to go to the ally who is higher up on the chain to support your efforts. It's great collaboration and it's a great experience. The second thing I just want to clarify, Tim mentioned that every interpreter should be using the PARC as a requirement, or it's required. The PARC actually isn't required of K-12 interpreters, Tim. Just it's recommended, it's not required. Just had to clarify that.
Did I say it was required?
Yeah.
I think, okay. I meant to say that it lists requirements and that those are.
And maybe I heard it wrong, but wanted to clarify all the same. Hi, Jordan and Lindsay. Kirsten.
Sarah actually raised her hand before me.
Who did?
Sarah.
Sarah. Okay, Sarah.
Thank you. I had a quick comment because I was going to ask her directly, but maybe you can sort of facilitate us connecting. I'm very interested in the leadership supervision certificate program that she went through. So I know.
And I'm sorry, but Sophia, you were in this certificate program in the supervision leadership, right?
If you're talking about a class, then I did take it, but it's not a certificate program.
No, it was just parsed out for the K-12, but I thought there was one other intern. So right now it's going on hiatus.
Okay.
And we're hoping to bring it back in a different way, but it's going to take a little bit of time.
Okay.
Yeah. Kirsten.
I'm a member of NAIE, but I'm not totally involved and know all of the services they provide. Does NAIE have anything about like finding an advocate on that level to help with schools that are struggling in my same position?
No, but that's a great recommendation. And I'm always open to putting together a talk group. I think that also Lori Bolster has one, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and Kirsten, if you want to talk more through that, because I know that you've mentioned it, I think in class before. So if you want to talk more, it's every situation is going to be different. So just knowing sort of the dynamics of each situation might expedite things. And the same with Inger. Because that shouldn't happen.
I just didn't know if there's something that like was already established with NAIE that would help with that.
No, but they do have their networking. They do have, those membership private conversations, if you're a member. So it's not all across social media. The system's hard to work within. Okay, so Lindsay and Jordan, how did your work go?
I think it was successful. It was the first time we decided to do 10 minutes in 10-minute increments. And so Jordan started as Joe, and then I was Susan and any students that asked questions. So it was nice to go back and forth like during one chunk of time. Does that make sense? And then the next 10 minutes, I was Joe, and then he was you and the students asking questions.
So for clarifying purposes, you were both team interpreting for the whole time, but in 10-minute increments, you changed the characters.
Yeah, because we thought about having just one of us as Joe, one of us as you and the students, but then we realized it would have been more interpreting practice for the one that was Joe. So in a real situation, that probably would be more effective, but we wanted to try it this way so we had equal amounts.
Excellent. And Jordan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it was effective. There were a couple moments where it was a little bit confusing, just like, okay, who am I now? The 10 minutes is up. Who am I interpreting for now? But I think that was only towards the beginning. And I think once we got into the groove of it, it went effective.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Were you two allowed, did you see each other?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we use Google Meet. And so I could see you guys on one side of my screen and then Jordan and I on the other side. So yeah, it worked really well.
Okay, so I'm going to actually, thank you both for sharing that. For those that have to leave, I do want to mention one thing. Somewhere in the grading, I don't know where, the journal, it must have been, it was mentioned that the team interpreting, you've kind of switched around with different players than what you're scheduled with. Is that the case?
I don't think that's the case. I think it's the team interpreters that are scheduled for the team assignment specifically have remained the same. I haven't done anything different with that. But there are some assignments that are like, we'll switch out an assignment because the link's broken and we found a really good assignment that's like an hour or an hour and a half, or it's really long and strenuous. And so we'll ask, we'll poll the group and be like, is anybody willing to team, this really long assignment with us? And so we've done additional teams when we run into roadblocks with links not working or not having access or things like that.
So I'm just curious, which is fine. And, good for you that you've collaborated. But I am curious, if links aren't working, why I wasn't notified?
Because we were punting.
Well, and I appreciate that, but it doesn't fix the issue.
I thought someone did reach out and say that something wasn't working on the homeroom. Am I wrong? Does anyone know?
Some of them are your repeated links that didn't previously work. So when you put in the same link that didn't work the week before, those are the ones that I think we're just autonomously replacing with something else.
So Sarah, I'll get to you in a minute. So I did put in the homeroom that if a link doesn't work, to absolutely find another source, right? That's just, do the work and figure that out. But if there's a link, and also if they're duplicated, the intent isn't duplication. So I think I put that in the homeroom as well. So I just wanted to make sure, because I don't want you to switch your teams, but if you're adding a third team member, that's a different approach. That's a different scenario. Thank you for clarifying that. Sarah?
Maybe this is where some miscommunication happened, but I have the homeroom post up right now, and it says, redo and compare first and second interpretation, or find a different stem and note that in the journal. So from my reading that, I guess my perspective, and I can't speak for everyone else, would be to just note it in the journal that a link was broken or something, we switched it out because it was duplicated. And I guess my interpretation of that was we didn't have to contact you, and just note it in the journal. So, but if you would prefer just us letting you know.
No, okay. I don't need to know that. You're misunderstanding me. My understanding of whatever the post was that the class has taken upon themselves to switch around the teams who they were teamed up with. So I wanted to clarify that I didn't want that to happen, because as I mentioned in some of your journals, if you're reading them, that the objective is far beyond this. It's so much bigger than interpreting. It has to do with working with collaborating with different styles, with different techniques. It's all of that in a safe environment until you're out in the real world. And, for those that you have teamed in the real world, if you end up with a team that is more challenging than others, you have to figure out what to do. So having those tools or reflections sort of in your tool bag are important. That's kind of my perspective of the teaming part. So I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, so we're in our 5th week. You only have 2 more weeks. Are you pretty excited?
I think I'm more worn out than excited.
And you will be worn out, and then you can, take a nap and then focus on your portfolio. You will miss it though.
It's one nap. We only get one nap.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I hope they enjoyed. To contact Joe. If you want Joe's email address, you can ask Yvette. I would give her work email, not her personal email, or you can contact me and I can get it to you. She is a great resource, and Kirsten, certainly because she is a lead interpreter working within a system, she is very patient. She is very calm. She's a very, what's a word that would sort of capture her?
Angel.
And she just knows how to talk with administration, in a very professional way. So she's a good model for that. So, all right, anybody that wants to stay on, feel free. And other than that, if you need to go, and I'm going to stop the recording right now. Stop somewhere.